Welcome to Cancer and Peace. My name is Sean Stewart. I'll be facilitating the conversation today with Peter Scalzo. He's the host and the cancer guru, my good friend, and we're going to talk about the role of emotional health on a cancer journey today. So I think we both really enjoy this conversation and topic. We've got a lot out of Pete Scazzero's work in the emotionally healthy spirituality and emotionally healthy discipleship. And so there's a lot of thoughts that we can go and directions we can have here. But I think this is an important role or important discussion to have for somebody who's in a cancer journey. And I'll let you kick off a little bit describing your feelings and, what you think are the importance of going through and understanding your emotions and how they play into a cancer journey. But I have a lot to think and add to.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. So it definitely is a groundbreaking concept for me about exploring an emotional life within the context of the cancer journey. And so my story, and I've mentioned this before, is that I grew up as a feeling stuffer, as an emotion stuffer. Didn't want to experience emotions, maybe anger, but was not vulnerable, did not cry, did not show, quote, weakness or any kind of tough emotions, just didn't show it, and tried to suppress them. And it wasn't until my 14th surgery, and I've spoken a lot about that, where I was in that place of darkness, despair, only a 5% survival rate, and getting that news, being in ICU. And yet what happened was I was delivered a journal, as you know, empty journal, and that was the thing, exploring my emotions, that unlocked my healing, my rescue, my journey that brought me into life, from death to life, was processing those tough emotions, especially fear, anger, and sadness. And I think part of it is growing up in a community of faith, a faith community. And at the time, emotions were not encouraged. They were viewed as even sinful at times, I think I remember. So I was careful not to show fear or anger or sadness because I wanted to, quote, be spiritual and spiritualize those emotions and what I was going through. But clearly, through my journey and I've detailed my cancer journey, but 17 going into 18 years, clearly I had tough emotions that needed to be processed. And I was stuck. And it wasn't until that time where the medical solutions were all gone, I thought I was going to pass, that what unlocked my healing and my journey into peace, into inner peace, was to express those emotions and process them.
This is good. You've set something up here, and it reminded me of something that you'll connect with, and is the Brene Brown, her work in this space. And I too grew up as an emotional stuffer. My wife would have said up until like 6 years ago, I'm going to say, that she's seen me cry twice in our entire marriage. We've been married for going on 34 years right now. And so this is a place where I had that shared feeling, and there's also a shared revelation. But Brene Brown's work was something of trying to figure out what made somebody wholehearted. What was the difference between people who were wholehearted, and she put together criteria, and she did a lot of research. And if you haven't seen the TED Talk that's out there, I can't remember the exact title, but it's something about wholehearted people and Brene Brown. If you just TED Talk or do a search on TED Talks and Brene Brown, you'll come up with this. And one of the things that she found was that wholehearted people share those, you talked about the tough emotions, they share vulnerably the things that are happening in your life. And so you begin to share more vulnerably. But to do that, you have to be willing to share emotions. Mm-hmm. And I think the key thing that I kind of wanted to highlight off of is that she, in her work, described that you can't selectively stuff emotions. So what happened, the difference between wholehearted and people that weren't wholehearted were others who tried to stuff their emotions, the hard things, and not share the real things that are in their lives. They would cover them up when it may be with alcohol or any number of other coping mechanisms. It could be almost anything. Sex, drugs, rock and roll. You get the point. It's like there's all kinds of things that we can cover them up with. But when we cover or we stuff those emotions, we also stuff joy. We stuff all the great things. So we can't just stuff the things that we don't like. And so what kicked me off into thinking about that was you talked about experiencing difficult emotions. And so I wanted to just re-look at that for a second, because the importance of actually expressing difficult emotions and not stuffing them is it opens the doorway to feeling the peace and joy that we talk about here.
It's a great segue. And I'm going to add, besides the sex, drugs, and rock and roll, in my own case, I'm going to add.
I'm not sure rock and roll actually is one now that I think about it, but
But anyway, performance,
yes,
working, and also exercise, over functioning as a numbing agent. Those, I mean, I've been guilty of doing that, so I didn't have to feel. And you mentioned joy and peace. That's really wonderful. I was doing trauma work recently, and the person said to me, think back to a time of joy and then sit and feel the body sensations of that joy. And I was thinking to myself, I'm not sure I've ever said to myself, this is how joy feels. The warmth in my core, the lightness, the giddiness kind of thing. And it was, my daughter will like this, but it was like at the birth of my granddaughter. And that was a moment of joy for me. And I thought, gosh, I've never really focused on what the body sensations, how physically, emotionally, how I actually feel about joy. And yet you're right, because you suppress one end of those emotions and then the other end is also suppressed and you become a robot. And that's what I've been. It wasn't until I got into recovery and I had this 14 surgery where I let my emotions come out and I processed them. And I understand that runaway emotions can bring us to some dangerous places. And I get that there are places where we get stuck and those emotions are ruling the day and they might lead to depression or, things like that. But the opposite end of that is not processing them at all. So I think for me in the cancer journey, I think I have a balance of I need to process those emotions, all of them, including the joy and the peace, but all of them. But also, especially with the tough emotions, reminding myself of what God has to say. His scriptures have a great amount of, the balm of Gilead kind of thing, this healing ointment that gets applied to the sore and has this process of healing, and that's God's word for me,
What you shared, there's something that just causing me to think a bit, and I had gone through the trauma exercises that you're talking about and feeling, and I did run across some really profound understanding, and what we're talking about is not being ruled by our emotions. That's not the point. And so I think there is a difference here that we should just draw those lines a little bit. Is being ruled by your emotions would be, you don't stop and think and understand what's happening. You just feel and you move, and you feel and you move. And that generally would actually lead you to be running from pain. That's what I would, if I'm just ruled by my emotions, I would just run from pain, because when pain comes and I don't want to feel pain, I will try to always run from that. But I had this same thing you talked about, and I remember that experience too. But there was a different one. It was letting my body, my mind speak to my heart. Now that one was a profound experience, because the feeling that I was asked to describe was, what would your body say to your heart? What would your mind say to your heart? And my body was like you never loved me.
Mm.
And that was like, whoa, wait a second, where did that come from? And what I recognized is that there was a truth that was there, and that was feeling that I spent most of my life then doing intellectual exercises because I didn't love the rest of me.
Mm. Wow.
And without knowing that, I was covering up something. I was covering up feelings of unworthiness, of unlovability, all these types of things that were affecting the way I thought and acted. And man, that is like this aha moment. It's like a light bulb coming on. Wait a second, that's affecting the way I think and act. And so then I spent most of my adult years over intellectualizing because I was looking at my mind as something that's valuable, but my body as something that wasn't valuable, that was unlovable. And by not processing that feeling or emotion, I was doing unhealthy things and being unhealthy. And really important learning for me, but it adjusted kind of my life the moment I processed, the moment I felt it, the moment I was able to sit in the more difficult emotion and feel it. It changed a bit about who I am and how I interacted. And so, and I say that as just when you're in this cancer journey, you're coming into something, and there's probably some people here who haven't been stripped, like we talked about in the last episode, stopped and where they're at and asked what's most important. And I think part of the call is to stop and feel the loss, feel the grief, feel the sadness, feel the pain, feel the disappointment. And in that, there's something to be learned, and it's going to open the door to something else.
Yeah, I think of a few phrases, just catchy little phrases like to feel is to heal and to reveal is to heal. So how important, and you know, our emotionally healthy spirituality tool, that unprocessed emotions that are buried don't die, you know, but they stay buried within and wreak all kinds of havoc. Not to do that. And so I think from a faith-based community point of view, which is where I'm coming from and going into this cancer journey, it was interesting to express tough emotions to a lot of Christians that were really taken back by that. You know, like, oh boy, you know, Peter's in a crisis of faith and, you know, what's going on with him? What's wrong with him? And yet I believe God was saying, yes, process those emotions. And because I wired you with those emotions, and I have a scriptural truth for you also to fill your mind and your soul with. And you know, it's all through the Psalms. I mean, I read a Psalm every day, and
Yes, I want you to tell me about the Psalm because I think, and there's a concept here I want to.
Okay.
As you say it, I want to think about this too. It's I'm only stopping you because you mentioned process.
Mm-hmm.
And process could be something that maybe feel and express.
Mm-hmm.
Feel and express is a form of process. And if you don't feel the emotion, you're not processing the emotion. You could say, I'm going to intellectualize that there's sadness out there somewhere or anger out there, but you actually have to feel the emotion and in some ways let that expression take place in your body to process it. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I stopped you is because I think if you now go to where you're getting ready to go in the Psalms, it's like, what's taking place here?
Yeah, and I also want to do the heart check tool.
At the end, yes, I think that's a good, I'd like to leave that tool.
So cancer patients, we have a tool for you to use that will help you explore your emotional life. Excuse me. And I'm so impressed with the Psalms, mostly written by David, and how he's so willing to step into the anger, the sadness, the fear, and even the joy and everything going on inside of him, that he just states it. It just bubbles out of him.
He's expressing them.
He doesn't have to think about it, really. I mean, obviously our mind is engaged, but his heart is just like bursting forth that, man, I'm angry about this. Do this, God. And where are you, God? And I feel like I'm sinking, and it just comes out of him naturally. And I think it's beautiful. And
And Pete Scazzaro says that the Psalms are 2/3 lament. Now, I haven't researched it myself, but as I look at them, I'm guessing that's pretty close to right.
yeah,
And so 2/3 of the Psalms are lament or difficult, what we describe as difficult emotions,
Yes.
expressions of difficult emotions.
and David is in the process of running from Saul, or he's doing whatever, and there's enemies going after him. And, most of the time, I know some examples where the psalm just ends in this black place, but
Yeah.
most of the time, he will lament and then come back to a place where he says something like, "And yet God is my refuge and my strength." A very present help in trouble, that kind of thing. And I think I resonate with that. I resonate with letting those emotions bubble out of me and then coming back to a scriptural truth. And it might not be, I don't know how long it took him to write some of those Psalms, but maybe days later that I come to that place of, okay, God, you are my refuge and strength. You are my rock and my redeemer. Because I get to that point when I process those tough emotions. Now, in the hospital that time in ICU, that was days later.
Yeah, but one of my favorite stories is not because I don't know why it is, but it's the fact that you literally shook your fist at God.
Yeah.
And it's not because God deserves to have our fist shaken, it's because the realness of what you're experiencing and expressing. To me, that's big. Because once you're into realness, it moves you along towards this journey of wholeness.
Yeah, it's all through the scriptures. There's a number of biblical characters that express anger towards God or towards people, and depression, despair, a number of them.
I think that's one of the interesting things about this is you talked about the Psalms and you see great expressions of feelings towards God, disappointment, anger, bitterness. And the beauty of it is you don't see God slap them down. Show me the Psalm where it shows you expressed your heart to me and then there was punishment for that.
Yeah.
It's not there.
Right.
At least not from my reading. I haven't seen it. And I think that's an important concept for us to grasp here is sometimes it feels inappropriate to process and express our real emotions. Mm-hmm. And it's a process. It's an expression. It's what we're really feeling. And it's not wrong to allow those feelings to be there and to be felt and expressed. It doesn't mean we stay in bitterness. It means that we actually have to understand why we feel the way we do, where it's coming from, and allow that reality to be deeply understood in our lives.
Yeah, and I think, the scriptures have a lot to say about, don't fear, don't be anxious, and those kinds of things. And that language is only there because we do experience those emotions of fear and anxiety, and to deny that we experience that is to deny our humanity. Even Jesus experienced agony and sorrow in the Garden of Gethsemane, and was said in Hebrews that he learned obedience from what he suffered. There was this spillage of emotions. He had a lot of he had weeping, sadness, he had joy, he had agony and sorrow, all that, all those emotions.
I think that leads to something, and before you go to the tool, there's something you described Jesus in. To me, one of his greatest expressions was when he expressed Psalms 22 while he was on the cross. Because a lot of people hear this, my God, why have thou forsaken me? He's quoting Psalm 22, this deep lament that's in Psalm 22. And as he expresses his heart, you also see deep purpose.
Mm.
And I think that's part of why the processing is so important. Is we talked last time about this idea about finding purpose. Like what would be on your tombstone would not be, becoming the CEO or becoming, the world's greatest attorney. There's a purpose that's greater that's taking place in our lives, and we're on that journey. And so part of what's happening in processing hard emotions and the deepness of this is we're working our way towards greater purpose, something that's greater and deeper than we could imagine without having that experience of needing to trust in this higher power.
Mm. Yeah, that is wonderful.
And so I think on the backside of that, I think one of the things that you wanted to leave with people here was a way to start that processing.
Yeah, so it comes out of the halls of recovery, specifically relapse, but it's a nice tool to help to get into an emotional life, and it's called a heart check, HEART, and the H stands for hurting. So the question is, am I hurting? The E stands for exhausted. Am I exhausted? A is angry. Am I angry? R is resentful. Am I resentful towards someone? And T is tense. Am I tense? And even to journal that, but just to ask myself that every day, those questions. Where am I at? It's kind of like a temperature reading.
And at some point, we're going to have one of our friends here who's big in the trauma healing area come in and talk about, where do you feel tension at? Those are things that you and I have gone through in that training or in those teachings, which have been good because you feel tension in your body. And I love this concept of your body is a major prophet, not a minor prophet. And that's learning to feel. Your body is going to feel before your mind even knows what's going on. And this is why it's important to start processing, because if your body feels it, it will come up with a solution to manage that pain, that suffering. But if you take time to process it and feel it and express it and understand it, then you can come to a healthy place that actually allows you to grow. And so for me, I like the heart check. I don't do always a full heart check, but this is a daily inventory exercise in recovery, meaning that you can set it into a daily rhythm of quiet time or morning time, or it could happen any time of the day, or a daily rhythm of going through a heart check. Almost without fail on a daily basis, I check for tension and anxiety. Because anxiety is always a trigger that there's something that I need to release. And so I feel anxiety in my stomach first.
Yeah.
And as I feel that anxiety in my stomach, and I've learned to go, why is that there? What's causing me to feel anxious? Where is it coming from? And if I start and I have this as a routine, what I find is that a lot of times I'll find, well, I'm worried about something in the mission that I feel like I need to control or manage, that I need to consciously release to God. Hey, I'm trying to manage either the finances or relational strife. Most of the time it's relational strife because I feel tension when there's relational strife among myself or family or even members that are part of the team here. And then I have to make a decision. Hey, am I going to work on forgiveness? Am I going to release this to God and say, this is yours to manage, not mine? But these are all part of the processes. And then if I just felt anxiety and stuffed it, it wouldn't die. It would still be there.
Right.
And it would just grow and grow and grow and grow.
That's good. I like that. I think about it in a cancer journey. Anxiety, which is really fear. And I've experienced that emotion quite a bit. And it's usually that I'm scared of what we're going to find in the test. We're going to find more cancer. I've had 6 recurrences and it's, pain and suffering and the threat of death. I have metastatic cancer now. And so the issue of letting go, releasing to a higher power is huge on this point. And I think for me, it's, can my higher power be trusted? That's a foundational question. And I've come to the realization through my journey, through pain and dealing with what's happened in my cancer journey, that yes, my higher power, that God can be trusted. He can be trusted with my life, with my soul. I remember in 2017 when the doctor came in with a surgeon oncologist fellow, a tumor the size of a tennis ball, tumors throughout, and they said, that's it, we're done. And I remember saying to myself, God, can I trust you with my spirit and my soul that will live on in spite of this body? And the answer was yes. It was not an easy transition to make, to think that way, but the answer was yes, and it's because he could be trusted.
That's good. I think when you think about a heart check,
Yeah.
there's almost always an action on the backside of that too. And so, and the action, I say that there's almost always an action. There's something for you to do in processing. And so I think it's easy just to bump right past hurting. But if your body is physically hurting, or if you're feeling hurt, the body physically hurting may mean that there is need for attention. I mean, when there's a wound needs attention.
Yeah.
And so we shouldn't ignore hurt in our body, and we also should not ignore relational hurt. If you're feeling exhausted, there's probably a reason why. And it may be that you are really sick, or you may need to rest. It may be that you're going at too big of a pace. And so one of the things that you think about is like your body is telling you something that you need to process, understand, and once you get to the bottom of it. And I know that chemo patients really struggle with feeling exhausted. Their body is being attacked by the chemotherapy, and that's a very difficult place to be, and they need lots of rest to be able to manage that.
So just, sorry to interrupt, so last night in my recovery meeting, the question was, what do you do when for the heart check, when you're hurting, exhausted?
Nice. Yes, so there is something.
Exactly
yes.
what.
Perfect. Yeah.
It was the action that you take when you recognize you're in these places.
And I think that's the thing that we're trying to get to off of this heart check, is to say, it's not just to write it down and walk away. It's telling you that there's something that you need to do on your journey. So emotional health says, I need to be feeling, knowing what those feelings relate to, and taking an action. And I hear this concept all the time. It's like your emotions are like like a warning light on the dashboard of your car, but it's the dashboard of your life. And so a lot of people will tell you, we grew up in environments where emotions we're told were not important.
Right.
They're super important, but they don't always mean that the car is going to blow up. It means attention.
Or even sinful or wrong to feel that way.
Yes. And emotions are not that. Emotions are a really important part of our humanity.
Sean, and I want to add that, because this is a great discussion, that this is where my emotional life locks with my spiritual life. This is why spirituality is so important, because then I know what to do with those emotions. My spiritual life has a response, an action for anxiety, hurting, resentfulness, anger, all those things.
Oh, yeah.
They have to be processed, but I do have a place to go spiritually with those items.
Yeah, you reminded me of Pete Scazzero's famous quote, and is, you cannot be any more spiritually mature than you are emotionally mature. And so if you're an emotional infant, that means you're going to be a spiritual infant. That your spiritual development and your spiritual life with God will be at an infant level. And I remember when I started the EHS, or Emotionally Healthy Spirituality coursework, there's an emotional health test, and it has, infant, child, adolescent, it works this all the way up to an adult. And I remember taking it the first time, and it was something close to infant and adolescent. I was just like,
child.
If I was, to be honest, that's just where it was.
I get it.
And
Me too.
I think we should bring that and read some of those questions at some point in time here, because I think it would be really enlightening.
Yeah.
Because if you're honest about how you answer some of those questions, and some of the questions are thinking about, do I avoid, hard conversations? And do I stuff certain things? And so, so I found in that process that, in being honest, that there was a deep level of emotional unhealth, which by definition, by Pete's definition, meant that my spiritual maturity was
Wow.
really at an infancy level. And it opened the door to grow in spiritual maturity by going through emotional health. And it was, one of those Copernican revolutions in a sense, because it really changed the way I thought about the universe, the spiritual universe, in such a way that it influenced a lot of my own thinking now in faith. How do we approach our faith in our relationship with God? And it was similar to what you said. It's like expressing negative emotions about God it's just flat sin, but I was feeling them.
Right. I mean, do we have a few minutes just
Say it.
So, I mean, it's such an interesting book in the scriptures, but it's Job, and I won't go into all of it, but here was this man who's praised for being this like righteous man, this deep man of faith. And he, after the calamity came upon his life, and anyone would have been downtrodden, distressed, depressed, everything. One of his main questions was, why was I wish I hadn't been born. Imagine that. But it's a wonderful life, George Bailey question. Everyone would be better off if I wasn't born, but I wish the suffering is so great, I wish I had never been born. And God does not scold him for saying that, for having those feelings.
That's right.
He reminds Job that he's in charge, but he doesn't scold him for being human.
Yeah, that's right. Well, hopefully you have an idea of the importance of your emotions in your cancer journey. Processing these emotional health is so super important to finding peace in your cancer journey. I don't think it's possible to get to peace without working through the difficult emotions. And it doesn't matter whether it's a cancer journey or any difficult journey, but especially in a cancer journey. And so we're going to close our conversation there today. You're going to find a lot of resources on, I was getting ready to say emotionally healthy. You will find the emotionally healthy spirituality resources on cancerandpeace.com. And you'll see other resources from Peter himself. So we invite you to go there and check it out. But for today, we'll end our discussion here, and thanks for listening.
Yeah, and blessings to you all that are on the cancer journey. Thanks, Sean.
Blessings indeed.
Thank you.